Get ready for a spine-chilling experience. If you love feeling your heart race and the suspense creeping into the room, you're in the right place. But before we begin, I have an invitation for you. If you truly have the courage to face the unknown, go ahead and hit that like button now and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any terrifying stories. Share this video with someone who also loves the thrill of fear, but be careful. The scariest things tend to happen when you least expect it. Are you ready to face what's coming next? Let's see if you can handle it. It was Halloween, and my little brother Mateus and I were at the old hotel that our family had chosen for the trip. My parents rested in the room while the two of us explored every corner of that dark place. The lights were dim, and the dark, dusty hallways seemed perfect for Halloween night. We had decided to go to the top floor to order sweets and, perhaps, hear scary stories from an older guest. With me, 13 years old, and Mateus, just 8, our courage was at its limit. The elevator creaked as it went up, which only added to our excitement and a little fear. When the doors opened on the top floor, we felt a cold wind that wasn't coming from anywhere. As if the air there was different, heavy. The hallway was dark, and there was not a sound except our footsteps on the old carpet. We advanced slowly, with Mateus holding my hand tightly, his eyes wide with excitement and a little fear. It was almost as if something was calling us further down the hall. At the end, however, we saw a scene that left us transfixed. Two boys, who looked to be the same age as us, were standing side by side, staring in our direction. They were identical, wearing old, impeccable clothes that looked like they came out of an old photo album. "Do you see them too?" I whispered to Mateus, who just nodded with wide eyes. Without a word, the twins stared at us, their faces expressionless. But there was something in their eyes, a disturbing emptiness. I took a step back, pulling Mateus along, but the twins didn't move. It was as if they were waiting for us, inviting us to come to them. "They look different," I whispered to Mateus, trying to calm my own breathing. But something inside me, a sick curiosity, made me want to know more about who they were and why they were there, standing like shadows at the end of that hallway. Without even realizing it, we slowly approached, attracted by mystery and fear. As we walked towards them, something strange started to happen. The hallway seemed longer, and each step seemed to take us further from the elevator and closer to the twins. Mateus held my hand tightly, and I could feel his nervousness growing every moment. The twins remained motionless, their expressions unchanged, but their eyes seemed to follow our movements, as if they were guiding us to a destination unknown to us. I tried to speak, but my voice seemed to vanish into thin air, swallowed by the thick silence around us. When we were just a few feet away from the twins, I felt a chill run down my spine. The temperature in the hallway had dropped drastically, and a fine fog was beginning to form around us, obscuring the way back. I looked back and noticed that the hallway that would take us to the elevator was different, as if it had disappeared. There were no more doors, and only dense darkness seemed to cover the space that was once the way back. "Are we trapped?" asked Mateus, his voice shaking with fear. The twins finally smiled, a cold, empty smile that seemed more like a mask than a real expression. One of the twins extended his hand, and, without thinking, Mateus took it. Before I could stop him, I felt a wave of dizziness, as if the ground was moving beneath us. It was as if we had crossed an invisible barrier, and everything around us had changed. The hallway looked the same, but something was different, deeply wrong. As I looked at the twins again, I noticed something that made me freeze. His clothes looked even older, stained with dust and something that looked like dried blood. His eyes, once just empty, now glowed with a strange, hungry glow. I tried to free Mateus's hand, but it was as if something invisible was holding us there, preventing our escape. "Welcome to our side," they said in unison, and their voices sounded like a distant echo, something that came from another place or another time. My thoughts were jumbled. What do they mean by our side? Mateus held my hand tighter, and I noticed that he was shaking. The feeling of being trapped intensified, and it was as if the hallway was closing in around us. I looked at the twins and felt a wave of despair. Their eyes now reflected something I could only describe as a dark abyss, a hunger that seemed inhuman. We were in a place that didn't make sense, and I knew we needed to get out of there before it was too late. The twins started walking, and it was impossible not to follow them. It was as if our bodies were being pulled by an invisible force, unable to resist. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly, and a strange sound, like whispers and distant laughter, filled the air. I looked at the walls and saw old stains, handprints that seemed to want to escape, and I realized that we were in a place that didn't belong in our world. It was the Seven Beyond, a floor that did not exist, a threshold between the world of the living and that of the dead. I tried to free Mateus's hand, but he seemed hypnotized, as if he were trapped by some sinister spell. They want to keep us here, I thought, despair rising in me. The twins stopped in front of an old door, made of dark, worn wood, and gestured for us to enter. "You should never have come," they said in a tone that seemed almost regretful, as if they themselves had been trapped for a long time, forced to lure others into that trap. When I looked at Mateus, I saw something that made me freeze. His was different, pale, and his eyes were empty, exactly like the twins. I called, but he didn't answer. In panic, I tried to back away, but the corridor behind me was just infinite darkness. I was alone, trapped in the Seven Beyond, and all I had left was that mysterious door that called me to a destination. Unknown and dark, the door slowly opened, revealing a dark room, lit only by a dim, flickering light. The air was cold and smelled of mold and old dust, and oppressive. Mateus was next to me, but his gaze was empty, fixed on some distant point, as if he was no longer there. The twins stood outside, watching, and their smiles seemed to have become even wider, wide and distorted. Inside the room, there were mirrors on the walls, and when I looked at myself, I saw something that horrified me. My reflection was distorted, aged, as if time had passed in the blink of an eye, but Mateus was next to me. His reflection was even stranger. He looked older, with deep circles under his eyes and a disturbing smile I'd never seen before. I looked at him in reality and noticed that he was smiling too, a smile that wasn't his own, but an exact replica of the twins' smile. "Matthew, what is happening?" I asked, but he just laughed, a cold laugh that didn't seem like it came from a child. It was as if something had taken over him, something that came from that sinister and unreachable walk. The twins watched us from afar, and suddenly, I realized the truth. That floor was a trap, a place where people were trapped forever, condemned to wander like shadows. Mateus and I were lost there, trapped in the darkness, and I knew that no one would ever find us again. With one last effort, I tried to run out of the room, pulling Mateus with me, but something held us back, an invisible force that pushed us back. "You are ours now," said the twins, and their voices echoed in the room like a final sentence. The room began to spin, and I saw our faces reflected in the mirrors, distorted and empty, as if we were just shadows of our former selves. Suddenly, everything went dark. The last sound I heard was the twins' laughter, echoing like a distant, disturbing memory. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in the hallway, alone. Mateus had disappeared, and so had the twins. I looked around and noticed that the hallway looked normal, except for one thing. I couldn't find the elevator or the exit. I was stuck, and every step I took seemed to take me back to the same point. And then I understood. I was now part of that place, condemned to wander the Seven Beyond, waiting for other curious souls to come to the top floor. Mateus, like me, had disappeared forever, lost in the darkness of that place with no way out. And every time I looked in the mirrors, I saw my own face, smiling in a strange, empty way, just like the twins. I realized that time didn't flow like it used to. I walked through the hotel corridors, but no one seemed to notice me. I screamed, called for help, but guests and staff walked right by, as if I were invisible. It was like I was trapped in a different layer, in a parallel reality. I returned to the top floor corridor countless times, hoping to find a way out, but each attempt led me to the same point, the end of the corridor, where there was only darkness and silence. I felt increasingly empty, as if part of me was disappearing. Memories of who I was began to mix, and at times I no longer knew if I was still myself. Sometimes I saw Mateus. He appeared in corners with the same empty smile, his eyes fixed on me, as if he wanted me to join him. I ran towards him, but he disappeared into thin air, like a mist that melted away at my touch. The truth was clear, he was now part of the Seven Beyond. And soon, me too. One night, as I found myself trapped between corridors that never seemed to end, I heard voices coming from the corridor on the top floor. Curious and scared, I approached slowly, and to my surprise, I saw two children, a boy and a girl, exploring the hotel. My heart froze. They were laughing, excited, and seemed to be looking for something or someone. The same invisible force that trapped me on that floor now drove me to observe them, to call them, as if I were a piece in the Seven Beyond cycle, destined to attract other victims to the same fate. I approached the children, and, like the twins had done to me, I stood at the end of the hallway, waiting for them to notice me. When their eyes met mine, I noticed something strange. My reflection in the mirror showed the same empty, disturbing smile that I had seen on the twins that first night. Now I was one of them. The cycle repeated itself, and this time, I was responsible for bringing them to the same hell from which I could not escape. The days, if time even existed there, passed, and I began to lose track of who I was or what I had experienced. More and more, I saw myself in the reflection of the mirror, and the figure that appeared was not mine, but that of a boy with empty eyes, the same ones that attracted me on Halloween night. I realized that I was slowly being consumed by the energy of that floor, transformed into another shadow waiting for new victims. Now, I felt the need to find others to join me, and the desire to see someone trapped in the Seven Beyond was almost irresistible. Mateus appeared from time to time, but he didn't talk to me. He seemed to have forgotten who I was, as if our sibling bond had been completely erased by the darkness. I felt a growing anguish, a desire to reach him and bring him back, but every time I tried to touch him, he disappeared. It was as if the Seven Beyond had ripped away from him everything that linked him to the world of the living. Now he was just a reflection of what was a silent and lost echo. That's when I realized that the only way to escape that place was to break the cycle. I needed to do something that none of the others inside had tried. Fight against the destiny that the Seven Beyond had imposed on me. But the more I tried to resist, the stronger the attraction I felt toward new children climbing to the top floor. It was as if an invisible force forced me to lead them to the same destination, to repeat the cycle of loss and darkness. On one of the quieter nights, I again saw a group of teenagers exploring the floor. Against my will, I was drawn towards them, but this time, seeing the terror on their faces, something inside me screamed. I didn't want to be part of Seven Beyond anymore. With a superhuman effort, I looked away and managed to disappear into the darkness, moving away from the corridor. However, I knew that my freedom was temporary. The hotel would pull me back sooner or later, and then I would once again be a prisoner of that floor's dark fate. One last idea came into my mind. I needed to find Mateus and help him remember who he was, to rescue a spark of our life before the Seven Beyond. If he regained consciousness, maybe we could escape together. I spent what seemed like months wandering the halls, looking for his face in every reflection, until I finally saw him in the Hall of Mirrors, motionless, looking at me with a blank, dark gaze. With all my strength, I approached him, calling his name. "Matthew, you are my brother," I screamed, desperate, trying to break the silence of the Seven Beyond. For an instant, the emptiness in his eyes seemed to waver, as if he had heard my call. A faint glow appeared, and he murmured my name, almost like a lament. I realized there was still a part of him there, lost but alive. I held his hands and, with all my strength, said, "Let's get out of here together," and as he spoke, an echo of screams and whispers began to fill the hall, as if lost souls were revolting. But the hotel, or whatever force was holding us, wouldn't let us escape. The lights began to flicker violently, and the mirrors around us they broke, releasing a dark mist that threatened to swallow us. Atheus held my hand tightly, and together, we ran down the corridor, facing the darkness that seemed to want to swallow us back. The elevator door appeared in front of us, and without hesitation, we entered, pressing the button for the ground floor. As the elevator descended, the mist tried to invade the cabin, wrapping itself around our bodies. I closed my eyes, holding Mateus with all my strength, praying that we could get out. When the elevator stopped, the doors opened, and we fell into the hotel lobby, breathing in the fresh, clean air of the lobby. The people around us looked scared, but it didn't matter. We had escaped. When I looked at Mateus, he looked like himself, and his eyes were alive again. But before we left, I turned to take one last look at the hotel. In the reflection of the glass door, I saw my face, smiling in an empty and disturbing way, like that of the twins who lured us to the seven beyond. Even free, we knew that a part of us would always remain on that cursed floor, ready to attract new victims who, like us, felt the mortal curiosity of exploring the top floor.